boring men. Nowadays, this would be considered bullying. The fact that the class vote in the graduation album said this, is my dark history I'll never forget. My name is James White. Ever since I was a child, I've been called gloomy by those around me. Short, fat and wearing glasses. Once I entered college, went on a serious diet and at least, managed to dodge being fat. Still lacking any appealing traits, I chose to work as a banker, thinking that I would at least have a steady job. My only pleasure was getting the occasional upgrade when I flew on business. One day on a business trip, I got to fly business class as a favor from my client. What thrilled me was not the luxury, but the feeling of superiority, being among those a notch above the rest. Excitedly go through the boarding process. Sometime after the plane took off, I noticed a flight attendant walking down the aisle was unaware of dropping her pen. It looked like she was going to walk away, so I instinctively called out to her. Sorry to bother you at work, but you dropped your pen. The flight attendant turned around at the sound of my voice. She was stunningly beautiful, sophisticated in her attire and demeanor. Then she said,
"Thank you so much for telling me. This was a gift from my family when I got the job."
It was apparently a very precious thing. The flight attendant was very grateful, and I felt relieved too. This led us to chat a bit during the flight while she served drinks. Her name tag read Alice Brown. I got to my destination but couldn't get her out of my head. To my surprise, I saw Alice in the lobby of my hotel after a dinner with clients. Turns out, we were staying at the same place by sheer coincidence. I took the liberty of assuming that these coincidences must be fate, and mustered up the courage to give her my business card. Sneakily added my cell number on the back. For me, that was an uncharacteristically bold move. I wasn't sure how Alice saw me, but to my surprise, she contacted me soon after. We went on a series of dates. More we met, the more we saw how different our personalities were from each other. I'm serious and pretty good at my job but otherwise unremarkable. Alice is glamorous, lively, and naturally draws people to her. Our personalities could not be more opposite. Even trying to enjoy casual conversations were hard without common interests. Every time we met, I was anxious she might break up with me, but Alice seemed to find our differences amusing. Somehow, I was able to marry Alice, such a beautiful and talented woman, in no time at all. It was like a Beauty and the Geek kind of marriage. But once we were married, reality set in. Things I didn't mind before became bothersome after marriage. Our polar opposites personalities created a gap that only widened over time. For instance, I wanted to eat meals cooked by Alice at home, but she preferred ordering from Uber to save time for us. On weekends, she wanted to go out to parties with friends, while I preferred to rest at home. She never said my sobriety or seriousness were bad, but she found it boring. On the other hand, I couldn't understand her lavish spending habits or superficial social interactions. Everything was upside down, leading to constant arguments. Our marriage, where we never agreed on anything, lasted only a year. It has been 30 years since our divorce, which felt more like a bitter breakup. I've never remarried, living a plain life just as before. After divorcing Alice, I bragged to those around me that I was done living with women, but deep down, I think there was always a void in my heart, wandering aimlessly. I managed to work at the bank until retirement, but without work, I feared I might end up as one of those old men who just goes to the library to read the newspaper every day. It may come as a surprise, but although I'm introverted, I actually enjoy going outside. I just can't stand crowded places, noisy spots, and areas popular with the young crowd. So, wanting to work a bit more, I decided to register at the Senior Employment Center. The Senior Employment Center was crowded with people in their early retirement years, just like me. When I finally completed the formalities and was relieved to get out, I bumped into a woman who was trying to enter the Senior Employment Center. The woman stumbles and I couldn't help but give her a hand. "I'm so sorry. Are you hurt?" When I looked up at her face to apologize,
Are you, James?
I froze and stared at her, speechless with surprise. It was Alice. Alice, now aged, wore shabby, worn-out clothes, a stark contrast to her past self. Though naturally older, her beauty remained intact. But she was so thin that I didn't recognize her at first. It was only when she spoke up that I realized who she was. Struggling to find the right words, I managed. "Oh, Alice, it's you. Have you been well?" That was all I could muster. After greeting each other, I considered parting ways but found myself wanting to know why she looked so worn out. Impulsively, I suggested, "It's been a while, how about we grab some coffee? We probably have a lot to catch up on," and led her to a nearby cafe. Alice silently nodded and followed. Sitting down, we were both aware of how much time had passed since our divorce, unsure of what to talk about. So, we started talking about food to break the ice, and I gradually steered the conversation towards her current life. It seemed she had been wanting to talk to someone. She began to share the turmoil journey she'd been on since our divorce.
Actually, I remarried right after our divorce. New husband was a wealthy business owner who turned a blind eye to my extravagant spending. I completely misunderstood that his tolerance was acceptance of me.
I couldn't help but smirk internally, thinking, "I knew it."
I continued living lavishly, not changing any of the habits you disliked, but there was a huge pitfall waiting for me.
She sighed deeply.
10 years later, my husband was arrested for fraud.
I was speechless with shock.
He had been selling off company assets and pocketing the money. It was too late when an internal tip-off exposed him. Fortunately, he avoided prison, but the company went under.
Her voice trembled, and it seemed it was painful for her to remember. Yet, she continued to talk. Perhaps feeling the need to confront the reality. Alice's family had been on a fast downward spiral since the company went bankrupt, having to repay debts and so on. Debt collectors would come to their place, and at one point, she feared they might become homeless. They managed to secure a place to live, but with 2 children, life was a struggle. Together, working from dawn till dusk, they barely scraped by to make ends meet. It seems that they were just trying to survive. Alice's husband eventually gave up, drowned in alcohol and stopped working. Alice believed she had a duty to repay the debts, so she worked tirelessly alone. For the sake of their children. But her husband gambled away whatever she earned. So the debt never decreased. After enduring such a misery for over a decade, a friend told her that wives are not obligated to pay their husbands' debts. Hearing this, she collapsed in despair. She decided to divorce her husband to protect herself and prioritize her life with her 2 children. Since then, the 3 of them have been living frantically. Alice, with tears overflowing, said,
I regret most that my spending habits were partly to blame for driving my husband to commit fraud, and as a result, causing my children to suffer. I was really wrong back then.
I couldn't find the words to say, but as her ex-husband, I thought to face Alice properly. Alice turned to me and said,
I'm really sorry for making fun of you at the time for being so serious and uninteresting. I now realize that not only for myself but also for our children, a solid person like you was best suited for married life.
Alice laughed emphatically when she said that to me.
Surely it was a curse for ridiculing your way of life back then,
Alice said, shrugging her shoulders. After confiding all the things she was reluctant to tell me, she seemed to feel somewhat lighter.
Now that I've finally finished raising the kids and am on my own, I have to make sure not to repeat my past mistakes. That's why I came to look for a job at the Senior Employment Center today.
Alice has accepted all her past failures and fulfilled her responsibility to see her children off to independence. It was a significant growth that I could not have imagined from the Alice I knew before. Listening to her till the end, I couldn't stop my tears and said, "You've worked hard for 30 years. We both lived our lives to the fullest," I said, commending Alice's life. A person I once loved seriously. Her personality and appearance have become completely serious, and I want to help her as much as I can, or so I think. A year has passed since our fateful reunion at the Senior Employment Center. Since then, we've occasionally gone out to eat together or consulted about work. Alice works on weeding, and I teach computer skills. We never run out of things to talk about, from body aches to good supplements, all elderly jokes. I never thought we could return to such a peaceful relationship after 30 years. We're losing a lot of things as we age, and we're building a mature relationship that's not about love or infatuation. I hope we can continue to support each other nearby and live our last life hand in hand and enjoy each other's company as much as possible. We both think this way,